My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your F.A.T.E. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of F.A.T.E. How's everybody doing today? On today's show, I have Mark Beale. He is a hypnotherapist that specializes in past life regressions and spirit releasement. I am super excited to have him on the show today to talk all about it. Mark Beale, welcome to your F.A.T.E, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you for taking the time today. I read your latest book, Past Life Awakenings, and I was blown away with the client regressions that you had. And I love something that illuminates me just a little bit more to what we're doing here, what our lives really are. And I am fascinated, and I can't wait to hear your journey as well. So why don't we start there? How did you get to where you are today? What was your spiritual awakening, your journey?
Yeah. So what I'm doing today, you're right. It's hypnosis, hypnotherapy, past lives, between lives, and spirit release, which all sounds like I do a lot of things, but that's really just one thing. And my awakening was awakening to each of those modalities and seeing how one leads to the next. So the first step was, and I had a pretty conventional life up until the age of 25. So I guess the first part of a healer's path is stepping onto the healer's path, but then you're stepping off a conventional path. So I was 25, and up until then, life was pretty good. But I had this little sneaking sense of an existential realization and just a subtle dissatisfaction that made me curious to explore if there's something more to life than the conventional, the material. And so with that curiosity, it started by going to a meditation retreat in India. And I sat down and meditated, and I just thought, just instantly it clicked. I've got a karmic connection to this, whatever it is. But then I sort of did meditation wrong, because instead of meditating, and I went into a hypnotic state, and then I went into a regression, which I would call a hypnotic regression, or I remembered being 10 years old, reading a book on hypnosis. And I thought I was a suit, and I've got an economics degree, and I'm a rational, intellectual guy, but I do have this connection to healing and hypnosis, and that makes me a bit weird, but okay. And I even didn't believe myself that it was a real memory. I doubted if it was true. I thought, am I making this up? And I had to call my mother to say, because as I read this book, I actually practiced it on people, like my mother and family, my sister. And I asked them, did I really do this? And so in one sense, I awakened to my spiritual path at 25, but I was also remembering past talents and connections that I had. But it was only after 25 that I started taking steps to making that kind of healing work part of my, everyday reality.
It's just, there's so much going on. So
yeah.
First of all, for my audience, what really is the difference between a traditional hypnotherapist and something that you do with regards to past lives? What is the difference there?
Yeah. So I am a hypnotherapist myself. I teach hypnotherapists. So I should say that happened when I was 25. I'm now 52. So that's 27 years in the making. And 8 of it was integrating the experiences and having the courage to get onto the path. And so it was by the age of 32, 19 years ago, that I became a hypnotherapist. I studied hypnotherapy, but I studied it still in India. And so they taught past life regression. I learned past life regression 3 months after I learned hypnotherapy. So I learned it in one go.
Really?
A lot of people, their path is they learn hypnotherapy, they do it for a few years, they do regressions, and then spontaneously some people go into past lives, and then they go, well, I'm going to have to learn how to deal with this. So really, a past life regression therapist, in most cases, is a hypnotherapist. He's just taken that extra step. And so when I train people to be past life therapists, the prerequisite is I train them to be a regression-based hypnotherapist first. And so then what is the difference? There are schools of thought in hypnotherapy, and this is becoming a bit old-fashioned now, but there are people who only do hypnosis, which is suggestion-based. They'll do visualization, guided meditations, various techniques to make change, but they don't even do regression, which is fine. And I would consider it honestly a simpler version, but then some people have simpler issues, and it's quite a legitimate way of doing things. And some people are hobbyists and they don't do it full time for 20 years, like people like me. But to me, it's really taking a next step, but it's an essential basis to past life regression, in my opinion.
Before we get into some of the cases in your book, what typically are your clients? Are they healing? Are they coming from healing? Are they looking for who's your client base? Who can benefit from this type of hypnotherapy?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, because it's also like, if you're a hypnotherapist, who would go on to do past life regression? And I might have an opinion that it's an extra next step and a slightly more complex one. But that may not be the case necessarily, because it's just whoever really has a karmic connection to the modality. So if you're a hypnotherapist and you just love that and that's all you do, then fantastic. You have a karmic connection to hypnotherapy. And there are plenty of people who think, well, just this whole idea of karma is, that's not my vibe. I'm in the Bible Belt. Hypnotherapy is great. I help a lot of people. What are you saying? You're doing something extra. This is perfectly not. And they're completely right. So the thing for me is I just have a karmic connection to past lives. I was born in New Zealand and I've lived most of my life actually in Asia. So you think, why would I, in New Zealand, born in a conventional life, become a past life therapist, which is weird, and live in Asia, why would you do that? But it's karmic connection. And therefore I have that connection to the kind of thought process as well. So the kind of people that come to me are also people who have a karmic connection to the idea of karma and to past lives. And so that's really one of the major things. I don't have to convince them or explain too much to them about the modality. They're already kind of dialed in. A lot of them are already healers. They're on the healer's path and spiritual path. That's a big part of what people bring to me, especially these days. And that's changed in 20 years. People were more like, let's, do weight loss, smoking, phobias, maybe some past life stuff comes up while you're doing it. But these days, a lot of that stuff, people just don't even do it so much. I mean, a lot of those habits, like smoking, it's just a lot less. And so people are coming and understanding. A lot of people come to me thinking hypnotherapy is a simple thing, so just do this simple issue for me. But then I'd have one session and realize, wow, this is a really sophisticated thing. I'm going to bring you sophisticated issues now. So
I think the most illuminating thing I got, there's so much illumination in this book when it comes to piecing together what we're doing here and everything, but I was absolutely blown away by the level of connection we have with our prior lives to this life, that we're completely and totally unaware of how the thread that binds us throughout our many lifetimes that we have. So can we talk a little bit about how everyone does have, whether or not you believe in karma or karmic action, and
yeah,
regardless, it really does feel like we are here many, many times to grow, expand, and learn as we march forward in our own path of development.
Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about people's lives and how their intentions, how they get pulled, how their own subconscious mind or they're unaware of even how planned or how calculated or how much connection there is to where they're at and what they're doing based on what has happened in prior lives. It's amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. Well, the word karma is a tricky one. But if you could just forget about karma and think about the law of cause and effect. So there are things that we've done in the past that influence us and affect us. So that's why I make people do this life regression before past life regression. Because if you're saying the crazy connections that our past has on us in this moment, but that's true in this life as well. So if you think about it, the decisions that I made at 25 have a crazy effect on me at 52.
Yeah.
And you think, and even physically, like I'm not doing those things now, but I'm living the life. The actions that I took 25 years ago directly impact me in every moment today. But then it's also the actions that I took 2,500 years ago when I was in Egypt, being a priestly class, doing something close to past life regression as well. So there are two, major causes of me being who I am is because of what I did when I was or 10 years old doing hypnosis, but I was also doing forms of hypnosis in previous lives, and both of them are affecting me equally. And I think it's very easy for people to understand that things that happened to me in childhood are affecting me now. They might not always they may not always know what it is. So that's the amazing thing. You put someone in a hypnotic state and ask them, go to a root cause in this life, and they go, oh, wow, that thing that happened to me when I was 10, it's really affecting my relationships now. I'm just replaying it, the same thing or the opposite thing. And they can understand that. But it's really much, and so when you do past life regression, it's exactly the same, but just in a slightly extended time zone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's so interesting. In your book, you highlight several clients that you've worked with in the past, and I'd like to talk about a few of them. And you kind of tie in these cases with spiritual law.
Hmm.
And before we get into the cases, maybe let's talk a little bit about these spiritual laws and how they come into play when it comes to our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got 7 spiritual laws, and these are observations that I made while doing past life regression. And it's just, I didn't, so karma, or just the law of cause and effect, everything has to have a cause. So there are karmic connections that we have. Then there are actions that we take to extend those connections. Then there are residues that we need to deal with some of those residues can be helpful, like a connection to past talents or abilities. But then we may have other residues where we've been criticized for acting on those abilities and maybe mocked for it. So we're drawn towards something like healing, but also repelled by it because it's caused us some sort of pain in the past, but also some pleasure. And so that's where we start getting tied up. And we've got these dualistic forces. And so that is the second law, duality, which is we're born into this karmically, we're born into this world. This world is dualistic. It has a lot of apparent opposites, and that can create confusion and suffering. And we're also in a finite body. That's the third law as I see it, which is things die, things end. And we can have pain there as well. Things are impermanent. So that in a way, those first 3 laws are kind of diagnosing the problem and the situation, the existential situation we face. But then the next 3 rules or laws give us a way out, a resolution. So we're born in a finite body, but we're born into an infinite universe. And there may be a part of us which is infinite. There may be a spark of that eternal soul in us. So we have we're finite and we die, but at the very same time, without contradiction, we're infinite and we're eternal. But in order for that to make sense, we have to have transcendent thinking, which is the 5th law. And we can transcend dualities, good, bad, right, wrong. But ultimately, the next and last step, the last duality is self and other. So transcendence of self and other, going beyond that is, once you've done that, there's a liberation and from suffering, basically. So as a therapist, this may sound a bit philosophical, but you notice in the book, the chapters on this are pretty short. Because I'm not looking to write too much philosophy. Like I'm a therapist, and I just want people to, be well, be at peace, and whatever you think after that is up to you. As long as you're feeling good in your emotions and you're at peace in your soul, I don't really care too much what you think,
Yeah.
And yeah.
I love that you're not really here to you're not preaching, you're not trying to bring anybody along even. You are literally just presenting these cases that have these amazing connections and that illuminate you to like, hey, this is an example of this spiritual law. So let's get into a little bit of I plucked a few of the things that I would like to talk about as far as the clients that you brought in. And I know I gave you a list, but like I'm gonna kind of go out of order.
Right.
What is her name? Is it Ursa? Is that what they called her?
It's a pseudonym, so
Usha? U.S. Usha? Is that her name? You called her in the book?
Could be. Yeah. I know.
Her mother, her U.S. Did I read it wrong? Her mother was her husband in a previous life
Yeah.
who was abusive and used to beat her and rape her and all that stuff. So she goes through a situation. She comes to you. She's overweight. She wants to improve her overall lifestyle and whatnot. And you get into her past life regressions and you take her back to a time in which she was like an early 1800s and a gambling
Yeah.
uh, husband and come to find out that that is her mother in her current life by it, one of the things I'd like to point out, her she's still kind of a dick as far as like, her husband was abusive and blah blah blah, but like her mom now is even kind of still a dick in many ways. And one of the questions I had for you as far as like seeing this through line, and you take it all the way to the in between life regression, which we should start talking about as well,
Mm.
how when they meet in spirit form, they're part of the same soul family. And they almost laugh about the abuse that she gives Ursa, in that she makes a quip of, well, somebody has to ignite you onto your spiritual path. And I found it so fascinating that do we really change that much from life to life, as far as even Alvaro seems to be keep getting murdered in his life, or he'll murder somebody, or he keeps getting murdered, or he'll murder somebody. It's like a cycle that he finally ends up breaking out of.
Mm.
But can you talk a little bit about how maybe our spiritual selves are much more an archetype or a certain way, whether or not we're a female gender or male gender in that life? That whole story was like, that is some fascinating stuff right there. Let's talk about her.
Yeah. Usha. Yeah. So you're right. She was 30 years old. She was a voluptuous, fun woman, attractive, but she was, significantly overweight to the point where she even had a theory that I'm sort of sabotaging relationships and trying to protect myself physically from too much. If I was too thin and good looking, I'd have too much attention and I can't handle that. I don't want it. So again, you get this push pull. On one hand, I do want to have loving relationships, but on the other hand, I don't want to be attracting, too many men to me. So, so then you've got this conflict and and that's a dualistic conflict, which is part of the problem. Then we've got to resolve it somehow. And so and it's also, what's affecting me in that life. And so, we don't just go to past lives. We regress to her being 11 years old. So she's 30 now, but she was 11. She was just experimenting with things like putting on almost sort of play makeup and dressing up. And her mother then starts to feel a little bit threatened. Now there's another woman in the house and that whole dynamic starts kicking in. But when she was doing that, she happened to be on a holiday and ended up being in an elevator and having a degree of abuse, a male doing something inappropriate. And she ran out of there and told her mother. And her mother said, well, it's your fault for putting yourself up. And so you don't need to go into past lives for that to be traumatic. And then her mother later on would criticize her, when are you going to get a man? And she was like, well, just to spite her, she'd put on weight and not get a man. But she did want a man. So, it was all a bit of a mess that required some untangling. And then we found a series of past lives where she herself had gone through a process of, being drawn into the material and the sensual world. So she was a woman in a number of past lives in a row, and she kind of got overly emphasized about the external appearance. She was she was a seductive person, but she got seduced by her own seductiveness and bought in too much to the material. Like, you're very beautiful, therefore you get the rich guys. And so that's great. But then there are some negative consequences. People fight over you, and then you end up sort of becoming,
Well,
wounded in that.
and they leave you to die in the desert. Like that happened in her. Like she basically, it felt
Yeah.
to me like she was using her sexuality to kind of get what she wanted in the worldly world.
Yeah.
And it backfired on her, and they left her in the desert, and she died of dehydration
Yeah.
because she was over accentuating that part of her. I mean, it is so fascinating how her life, and then to jump ahead.
Sorry, just to say, I'd like you mentioned dehydration. One of the main issues she had with weight is she could not stop drinking coffee with sugar in it. And so there's that link. So she, when you die of starvation or dehydration, you just come back to this life eating as much as you can with this thought, I'm not going to starve to death again, which makes sense based on the past life, but it doesn't make sense now. And it's actually counterproductive to be super overweight. You think it's so unhealthy to starve to death, but I'll compensate, but then you're overcompensating and then it ends up hurting you. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure she never even, maybe she did, who knows, that it could have been this past life that was still residing in her body, the memory of everything that she went through that was causing a lot of her current circumstances. You want to blame it on, not to say she didn't have a traumatic childhood with her mom. Her mom didn't give her any, accolades, it didn't sound like very often. And their relationship was super interesting to me, that he was also her abusive husband, but their soul family. It just goes to show in a lot of cases, what another thing that your book illuminated me to was that there's not any right and wrong, but a lot of which we endure in life is there to present a trauma, healing, a problem, solve it, to create growth. And even if somebody's a complete, total abusive person, they in some way could be connected to you karmically in the afterlife and be looked upon as not the enemy, but as your teacher in a very strange way. I thought that was unbelievable.
It is mind-blowing. It is mind-blowing, and you're right. And it's so challenging, though, because, it isn't right or wrong. Well, if you get abused and murdered, well, then it's pretty obviously wrong. But this is why we have to have the spiritual laws, because at a finite level, it's absolutely wrong. And they must go to prison for it and be punished for it. And we can't say that it's not. But that's why we have to have these differentiations, because at a karmic level, there's more going on. And it can be as well that there are balancing patterns, because as you mentioned, Alvaro, we've all been, most of us have lived plenty of lives, and most of us have likely at some point been killed. But the flip side is most of us have also killed or created the cause of killing as well. And so at some point at a karmic level, things tend to even out. And so that brings us out of victimhood a little bit. But it also allows us to expand from this finite subjective version of things are definitely right and wrong. That makes us think, well, maybe there's at a very strange level, there's some factors that balance it out. But then that's where we have that infinite level as well, which is where the finite level, it doesn't actually give us necessarily the answers, because the answers are so complex that if you're to try and understand and intellectually grasp all of the karmic causes that are there, there's so much. I mean, it starts at the Big Bang, and then it's at every butterfly's wings flat. So that's a bit too much to grasp. All it does is it gets us out of the finite limited thinking that we know that things are right and wrong. If we just start to question that and not so sure about it, and we maybe give people the benefit of the doubt, and maybe I have some responsibility as well, but that response, taking responsibility, gives you the ability to respond.
Yeah.
It gives you some strength and power. So people might want to resist taking responsibility, but it's a very empowering thing. And people are too quick to give away their power. And that's actually one of the implicit messages in the book. But then why is that? Because whether we can understand it or not, in a very strange way, we do get to an infinite reality, which is beyond space and time, beyond any action, completely beyond right and wrong. And it's beyond the ability of our finite mind to really grasp it. But we can't do it with our mind, but we can do it when we have transcendent experiences of a peace that passes understanding. And what that means is we take that peace back into our finite body, and it allows us to forgive and to give ourselves the space not to be overwhelmed by our anger or confusion, and to move on in our life and be healed to a degree. We're not hung up on dualities, and we can go on and live for the positive rather than being held back by the negative. So ironically, past life regression, you do it so that you can be more present in the moment and move into the future.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not about going back to the past and getting hung up on that. It's the exact opposite. You hypnotize yourself to dehypnotize yourself. You go into the past so you can be more present.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
What have you ever come across people that can't get hypnotized? I have to be honest. I tried to do a quantum healing session
Right.
and it didn't work for me. I could never, I just, it just
Yeah.
didn't work.
I
Do you
know.
ever had those issues or?
Yeah, I know. So just quantum healing is a form of past life regression, you can say. I've got a lot of students and friends and who do that modality, and I think it's really helpful in a lot of ways. I will say that that's often a one-off session, and it's one that is not preceded by hypnotherapy, and often doesn't include it. And so my process is to have also a 3 to 5 session experience, so people are able to deal with, what is hypnosis, what's my mind. Let's do something easy like regressing to this life, and then when it comes to like, now let's jump into the deep end into past lives, then they're able to do so. And if you just have a one-off shot at it, that can be part of the reason. So because then you may come out of it thinking, it's difficult for me to be hypnotized. And that's a shame because it isn't often. And there are also certain protocols that I teach people that that can overcome that. And that can also just be another factor of experience. Because remember, I've been doing this for 20 years every single day. And a lot of people just doing anything, hypnotherapy, QHHT, whatever, they're doing part of their first, 20 freebies. And they're a hobbyist who's been doing it for 6 months. If you do it with someone who's a full-time professional who's done it every day for 20 years, it may be more of a reflection of somebody at an early stage on their healer's path than it is a reflection on you and your abilities to access those states. Yeah.
Fair. What about somebody with aphantasia that is not able to visualize very well? I'm also in that category, so I'm not very easily able to visualize things in my brain. I don't know. I mean, I have had some health issues in the past and that have affected my brain, but like, what do you do with somebody like that, or have you even come across that? It's not very common.
Well, can I ask you to do something? Can you tell me what is the color of your car?
The color of my car is cream.
And when you did that, your eyes looked up. Did you visualize?
Yes.
Did you visualize your car?
I don't know if I was visualizing my car. I was just thinking about, did he ask me what the color of my car was?
Okay.
It was more that like, did he? I was like, okay, yeah, the color of my car is cream.
Okay. Well, how do you think that came to your mind? Was it just a word? Was it a feeling? Was it?
I think I flashed. My car probably flashed in front of my eyes. I would think yes. I would think that's
as a picture.
As a picture.
You're cured. You can't visualize.
I mean, I'm really interested in actually doing this. To be honest with you, like,
yeah.
Well, you and I can talk offline about that. But I want to.
Sorry, can I actually? What's an important point that you brought up? And so, like, I joking that I cured you, but the joke is you could do it all along. So here's the thing: you gave yourself the suggestion that you can't do something, but you actually could. Interesting, isn't it? And so I then challenged that and tested it, and we found I didn't give you a suggestion and say you could. I just asked you a skillful question, and you were able to come up with an answer and see that you had more abilities than you thought. And this is very common. A lot of people think that they can't do something, and they actually can. So they underestimate their ability to visualize. So that's one very important point. The other thing is they overrate the importance of visualization. And so for me, when you go through past life regression, you want to be able to know what's going on. You want to be able to feel it. You want to be able to hear what's being said. And you want to be able to see some of what's going on. And it's in that order. So a lot of people who've had a lot of past life regression and learned a lot. And and for me, I have elements of visual, but it's sort of more, for some people really run like a movie and it's Cinemax, but they are in the big minority. Most people will get glimpses. It's sort of like a fuzzy kind of a postcard, just enough to know, oh, that kind of looks like Egypt, and that's kind of a shape of that, and that tree looks kind of like that, and that face is kind of like just flashes up like a diffuse. It flashes up in a little bit, but then it's just enough that you know what it is. And then because of that, you feel, oh, I really love my car. And then you might sort of imagine like, being in, one time you took a nice drive in your car. And I bought this car because it feels really safe, or it's a convertible and it feels just so free with the wind in my hair. And so in past life regression, it's more important you have a sense of knowing who you are and what's happening and what it means. And the visual is by far the least important thing. And the emotion. So that's one of the things that comes up in the case studies as well. A lot of people, and even if people, because the funny thing is, even if people do see amazing visuals, they will come up and say, oh, I don't know if that was real. What did you see? Oh, I saw an amazing movie, but I don't know if it was real. And so then what needs to happen, and in fact, they usually say that halfway through. And then they go, I thought I had amazing visuals, but I thought it wasn't real. But then I had this big emotion, like I started crying. And then I knew that it was because of my students, and I couldn't see their faces, but I knew they were being killed and I knew I loved them. And so that's when I knew it was real. So visuals aren't that important, and they're not even convincing to people. By far the most important is emotion and a sense of knowing what that emotion means.
How far under are you when you do put somebody into a hypnotic state? Are they pretty conscious and aware, or does it vary, or are you out and then you come back and you record the sessions, or how does that flow?
I have a bit of a problem with hypnosis sometimes and my students particularly, because they hypnotize people too deeply. They're too, yeah. And so what we want, I'm joking, because people think that it's hard to get into a deep state, and the deeper the better. And neither of that's true. It's super easy to go into a hypnotic state, and you do have a witnessing awareness. You can be in hypnosis, wondering if you're in hypnosis, wondering, why aren't my pictures brighter? And then, oh, there's that thing that might be Rome. And then suddenly, oh, gosh, there's that feeling. And so your mind can be chattering away, but then suddenly you get hit by an emotion, you get hit by a knowing. So you're very much a witnessing consciousness. You're not unconscious. Your conscious mind is normally our conscious mind is in the background, in the foreground, our subconscious is in the background, but we swap. So our conscious mind it stays there, just sits in the back. It's a backseat driver, but we're in the front seat. So it can chitter chatter on the back. Either way, we're going to get where we need to go. And it's nice to know that we can see where we're going and you can observe what's happening. So that way you're sort of be able to give consent to to go down the next phases. So you have quite a strong witnessing consciousness, and that's why people often come up saying it's amazing. I was like I was dreaming, but I was awake watching myself dreaming. And so I don't know where the dream images came from, but I got to sit there wondering where they came from because I was still present to a degree.
That's fascinating.
And they're also just amazed. They're so surprised by what their mind does. And so if you're making it up, you're not going to be surprised. You're making it up and it's just boring. But if you're sitting there and your mind is thinking, what on earth is going on? This is crazy. Well, then your mind is surprising yourself. And that's your subconscious mind surprising your conscious mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is our subconscious mind, let's talk a little bit about subconscious mind. Is that sort of our higher self, maybe in a way? It's the observer, in many ways, the recorder of life, the one who's sort of in the driver's seat, and our ego kind of pretends like it's driving, but really they've got the real reins. Like how would you?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good way of putting it. And so I make that comparison that the finite self, that your conscious mind it's really just an operational front-end interface for day-to-day activity. The conscious mind really doesn't even have that many functions. It analyzes and deletes and distorts, generalizes, and it actually just sort of reduces and manages the information we come in. It's sort of a filtering device more than anything. We overestimate what it can do or what it's doing. So much of what we're doing is just coming from our even if you're driving a car, you had the experience where you just drift away and your mind is analyzing, thinking about something, but your subconscious is driving the car.
Yes, yes. Everyone has experienced that, folks. There's no doubt. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm here. And I don't remember the last 5 minutes of my drive.
Exactly. And so we're on subconscious autopilot in many aspects of our life, including our relationships and behaviors and our eating habits, etc. And so that subconscious autopilot, it helps us a lot of times. So it protects us and it gets us to where we need to go without having to think about it. But if that autopilot is out of date and we want to reprogram it and go somewhere else, well, then just wanting to in our conscious mind may not do the trick. So we need to then access our subconscious or have a felt experience or have something that gets through to us at a deeper level. So yes, I think the subconscious mind operates at that level, but also holds a lot of our emotions. And so we might consciously know this isn't a big deal, but our subconscious get involved and we get triggered because somebody annoyed us before, and we've got this pent up anger from 10 years ago or a lifetime ago, and they say something innocuous and we just lose it. And then that's our subconscious emotion kicking in based on memories from 20 years ago. And they go, what is this really about? And you're just fuming and you can't, you don't know what it's about, but you just know you're angry and you're out of control and you need some healing probably, Or you're having a moment and you can forgive yourself.
Yeah, we're so much more complex. Our brains are so much more powerful. And you really probably, I'm sure you have just felt amazing that you have given people the gift of releasing so much pain in their lives that they didn't understand and they didn't know why they were feeling the way they were feeling. And you must just like turn that light bulb on for people on a daily basis. So good for you. Now, let's start talking a little bit. When you do past life regressions, you also go back to somewhere where you call them the between life regressions.
Yeah.
And that's where we come upon three types of beings that you meet there, the spirit guide, the soul group, and the soul council.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what a between life regression is and what happens there and what those three beings are?
Yeah, sure. This does follow up. So we've got the infinite self we talked about, and that can equate to a superconscious mind. And so in our subconscious mind, it can be karmic things from the past that are affecting us now, and they're residues. So karma isn't just from past lives. It's from what happened, 10 years ago in my childhood that's getting triggered. And that's happening at a karmic level where we're going to this life or past life. That's us in a body, creating karmic actions, having a physiology that gets fired and triggered and has, emotions, like fear that's sort of built in. But then so part of past life regression is you regress people to their past life. But here's the trick. You also inherently, if you've had a past life, then you've had a past death. So we do past death regression, which means every time I do regress someone to a past life, I'll regress them to the end of that life. And I'll regress them to the moment of dying and leaving the body. And so that, in fact, that is an amazing thing. Don't you get bored of doing it day after day? Taking people through the experience of having died in past lives and seeing them bringing an infinite wisdom, which is they're not thinking this is bad and freaking out. The calmness and wisdom and release and peace that they have as they're dying and become dead. But they're not, I never think of it as dead, actually. I just think of it as you're a spirit in a body, and then you become a spirit out of a body. And then you go into, and before you go into another body, you don't just you don't die and then just jump in straight away to another body. That can happen. You can go very quickly, but for the most part, people tend to leave the body and then go into a spiritual dimension, and they can stay there for some time. And so that we can call that a between lives realm. And as they leave the body, the first thing that tends to happen is they look down at their body and release a lot of the pain, a lot of the emotions, and they may stay with it for a week or two, observe the funeral, appear to people in dreams, comfort people who are grieving them. But then after some time, and it feels like nothing for them, but after a week or two or minutes, hours, days, whichever, they're all are possible. What I then ask them to do is say, as you're looking down at that body or that world, what would happen if you were to turn and look up? And they go, oh, there's a light over there. And I say, well, what do you want to do next? What happens next? What did you do back then? They go, oh, I moved towards it. Okay, well, what happens next? How do you feel? I feel just so much light and love. Well, what do you see? Oh, I see a being. Oh, it's my spirit guide. And what's he saying? He's saying, congratulations, you did good. Come this way. And so, or sometimes it's a spirit guide, or sometimes it's a soul group member. So it can be a loved one. So people are in various conditions. A lot of times people are at peace. Sometimes people still have a bit of residue, like, I feel betrayed. I was killed. I'm not happy about it. But then they feel the light and the love, and they feel better. But they still might have some questions and like, what did all that mean? Why did they do that? What was going on? And so then they can get some sort of review from the spirit guide and some comfort from their soul group. And that can be just in the process of dying. And then they can continue on and they can stay in that state for some time. So that's where you'd mention Usha, and she's meeting with her mother. And interestingly, her mother actually hadn't passed in this life. So you can meet people on the other side as spiritual beings. Oftentimes, it usually is someone who's passed, but it doesn't even have to be. Their soul energy exists there and can exist in an incarnate in a past life. They could have reincarnated and still be in that between lives area, and they could still be in this body or find them as part of that soul group. So that's where they get to sort of decompress. And I make that analogy. It's like they're going through the karmic actions of having been in a number of lives together, and it's in the between lives that they know, oh, we did this for 5 or 6, 7 episodes, and then they become, instead of adversaries, they become like we were adversaries, but it's like it was a play, and now we're just actors backstage, just hanging out and saying, I remember that part, we had that fight and you sort of punched me in scene 2 and I hit the floor. You actually got me quite well, but it played so well for the audience, and the audience did a much bigger gasp than before. So that was awesome. I loved how you did that, even though you were punching me,
It's remarkable. What did Andy Warhol say? All the world's a stage. I mean, we're all down here. Like it's really is very much like that when you start getting into the nitty gritty of what our lives are. And do you think part of Ursa's mother's karma was that she was abusive to Ursa in this previous life, so she had to come back and be the caretaker, even though she was doing a poor job, in my opinion?
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely doing a poor job from a finite perspective. But you
Yeah.
could argue that from a karmic point of view, she was actually quite compassionate. Because if you decide to incarnate as a gambling, badass, good-for-nothing guy who's going to murder his wife, but that's what is required. And this is where the soul council comes in, because they've got this kind of crazy wisdom where it doesn't make much sense to us. And we can say that's bad and it's unacceptable, but that's just kind of us in a very finite mind. But if they can say, look, you have been, and they literally said to her, look, we whispered to you that you've got to follow a spiritual path more. You can't just get hung up on external reference to guys and sensuality. You're getting into unhealthy relationships, and you need to break that. And so they whispered that to her, and she went through a couple of lives and didn't listen and kept on doing it. And they said, look, we've whispered to you, and they turned up the volume. And eventually, at the end, if you don't listen to the universe when it's whispering, sooner or later it might scream at you. And that's kind of what it's doing. Then they say, we need a soul who loves you, who is willing to take on the karma of doing something horrific to you, like beating and killing you, just so that you have that moment where you're lying on the floor thinking, I'm not going to get caught up in this thing of, putting all of my energy into external people like a man or a relationship. I'm going to think there must be more to life, and I'm going to go on a spiritual path. And what I need is a soul who's prepared to give me a bit of a kicking for that to happen. And so in the end, there is an infinite part where it is hard for us to understand, but we can be at peace with it. And this is the thing. I don't tell people, or just transcend, and even though it seems really bad, it's actually fine, because the thing is karma, non-duality, blah, blah, philosophical babble. I just take them into that between life state that you're talking about, and I ask them, tell me, what do you see? I see the light. Tell me, what does the soul council say? And they say, and they say those things to them. And I ask, well, what does that mean? And they say, it means I can be at peace with them. So at that point of the session, she had taken over. So as I start saying what's happening there, she's saying, my mother is, just laughing and joking with me, and I'm just laughing with her as well. and I'm complete, and I have no bitterness. There's no conflict. We've resolved any of that, and we're just cooperating souls working together to do some crazy play.
Yeah.
And look at the themes that we learned, and what an amazing lesson. And thank you so much for giving me that experience that I needed to hit me into the path. And yeah, so I'm kind of just reporting what they're saying as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting. No one gets through life without trauma. Like you just can't come down here and like it's a
Yeah,
unicorn story if you get down here and you don't have any trauma in your life. It's gonna happen. It's how we grow. It's how we expand our consciousness. That's kind of why we're here in a way.
I agree. And that's
Y-
why that's what we sign. Another. It's a great point, Christy, because that's what we realize in past life regressions. We sign up for it. In those
Yeah.
between lives, we decide that that's what I want to do. And we decide we're going to go to planet Earth. And this experience, she was she was in the Wild West kind of in
Yep.
the United States when things were pretty rough. We decide that we're going to go into a dualistic planet with a lot of badasses and good and bad. And it's so beautiful. It's pretty rough. But we decide we're going to take the rough with the smooth. And
Yeah.
it's a great opportunity to learn because, like you said, if someone comes in and there's no trauma and no difficulties, well, then also have pretty much no learning. And this is a
Yeah.
planet which you come to learn about
Yeah.
duality and how to transcend it. And if you come
Yeah.
through it, then if you just don't want to learn anything, just stay in a spiritual dimension where nothing happens and you don't grow. This is a place where we just have to we get a great opportunity to have just amazing growth through these big challenges. And the big challenge is just to overcome just being really stuck on these emotions and judgments. Uh,
Yeah. And to awaken to who you are ultimately. I
Yes.
mean, not everyone is going to awaken obviously in
Yeah.
their lifetime. You're going to come back and then eventually maybe the universe does scream at you and you get the jolt that does put you on your path. For me, I think in this lifetime I was an atheist for most of my life up until just 5 years ago. I was an atheist,
Yeah.
staunch, like super science, and I had a health crisis and I eventually started evolving into energy healing and getting into plant medicine journeys and kind of broadening my mind. And I started doing this podcast to just start talking about spirituality. And now I've been doing it. And it really has been much of like a school for me. And I've just grown and expanded. But I now look at my illness as more of a gift
Yeah.
than anything else because it has taught me so much. It is I am a completely, totally different person on a totally different path than I was because of my illness. So
Yeah.
you just start looking at life completely different.
What,
When you,
what, yeah. Can I ask Christy, how did that happen? Because, when you first got the diagnosis, you went, oh, wow, this is a great learning opportunity. I'm so happy. You were, this is bad. And so what was the point where you were able to switch it and have that?
it was well, I mean, it's been a journey. I
Yeah.
mean, I almost died 10 years ago. So it was really 10 years ago
Mm.
that I was in intensive care for 11 days. I almost died. I had encephalitis, I had meningitis and had lots of symptoms after for years from my brain being all through all that trauma or whatever.
Yep.
So it was an evolution and it didn't at first it was um victim. You turn into victimhood. Why did this happen to me? I don't deserve this. I'm getting my life taken away from me. I couldn't live my life the way I used to. And
Mm.
you go through all of that, those emotions, and then you decide you're going to put your big girl pants on and get better and march up that hill and you start doing what you need to do. I feel like people on their healing path, one of the first things you do is clean up your diet. You
Yeah.
know, I, you clean up your diet, you go through all of that, you get on the right supplements, you start with the very foundation of your physical body and what you can do. Stop drinking, stop smoking. I was a party monster for most of my life. It was a journey, but I just look at my life like I probably knew this was going to happen to me before I got here. This is probably always something that was supposed to happen to me. And it
Mm.
was the thing that was supposed to spur me on to my quest of understanding who I am, what we're doing here, how complex and layered and magical and mystical our lives are. It's been a gift,
Yeah.
a curse and a gift.
Yeah. That's
you
amazing.
know?
I tell you, when I hear stories like that, one of the first things I think is just the gift that you didn't die quickly.
I know.
Because, like, to me, that's the worst thing that could happen. One minute you're living your life, the next minute you're hit by a bus, and there's no chance for reflection.
Yeah.
And to me, like, no, like that, and then they reincarnate more quickly and just try and pick up where they left off. But the fact that you can sort of have a little death within your life, and then you have to process it, and you get to really reflect on what's important in life, and you get to spend, years,
Years.
making new karmic actions. Because this is where karma, like, you've got the initial karmic actions, like I'm partying and had a good time before my awakening as well, and and then you're like, well, you realize at some point, where's this going? This is cool, and I'm in my 20s, but do I want to be doing this in my 30s or 40s? And then what are the consequences going to be health wise and just as a spiritual being? And so there's a part of you that thinks, I know change is coming. I just can't keep doing this. But then it's very easy to get stuck in patterns. And then 20 years go by and you're still doing it. And you're like, what happened? You know? And so for you to have that wake up call is amazing. And so that means you stop doing actions that you used to do. And oftentimes we call this depression. But depression is just a way of saying, I'm sick of doing what I'm used to doing and what I know. I'm going to take a break. And I think I'm depressed, but you're just taking a break and recreating and reimagining yourself. And then you start having these transcendent things. So I would never say to somebody in the midst of a trauma or tragedy, this is a great opportunity. But as I take them through the healing process, they end up saying that to me. And it's amazing. It's just such a, that it's amazing that not everyone can do that, but to come to that transcendent realization. So transcendence and the infinite all might sound a bit highfalutin, but we have this inherent ability when really challenged in life to have transcendent things. That's exactly what you did. You transcended, this is really bad and poor me and isn't this terrible? And you made it. You realize that there's an infinite higher purpose here. There's a bit of ego death that's involved, which is tricky. But then you're kind of getting reborn. Your finite self is dying to a degree, but you're getting born into an infinite self that's wise and loving and compassionate. And that is a kind of a party as well.
Yeah. It is. I feel more at peace, more content, less fear, more myself.
Mhm.
I mean, so many gifts, but it is a journey. It's not, I have gone through many iterations over the last decade of my life, and I now, even last year, I had a really emotionally, physically rough year for me, and I feel like every single time I go through these hard times, it's like burning ego, burning old karmic stuff off of me, and I come back eventually as a fresher set of eyes, wiser and more resolved than ever to stay in my good vibration, to understand who I am, to be that like it's, I'm, in meditation mode. I'm full on just submerging myself in discovery of not only me but of life and of our experience here, and it's just like this show is just giving me such a blessing to be able to really dive deep and have intellectual conversations with people that most the average I certainly wasn't having these conversations with very many people. It's hard to find like-minded people that are kind of, what, how do they say, I'm kind of out of the 3D matrix, if you will, that standard mainstream way of looking at life. I don't align with any of that because my perspective is completely changed now.
Yeah.
So, and you can't go back, I can't go back. I could never go back to being as fun as I was having, and I was having a very good time, folks. I could never go back to being that person anymore. It's just done, and I've evolved past it now.
Yeah.
So, I know we're coming up, we might go a little over. You let me know. You cut me off when we have to, but I really want to get into a very important part of what you do, which is spirit releasement therapy. I find that just fascinating. And I want to kind of see if I have any attachments myself. But what is spirit releasement therapy? And how do you help people release entities that they may have picked up along the way?
Yeah. So we talked about between lives regression. And so what, we just talked about spirit. You're a spirit that incarnates in a body and then leaves and goes into another body. And so we're getting into spirits already. And then we get into the between lives realm. We notice there's a spirit guide with us. There is a soul council that are in spirit, not in body. And there's, our soul group. So we're getting into, that's a spiritual dimension between incarnations. And that can interact with the physical one. So you can have people observing you from that spiritual space on Earth and supporting you, for example. So now that we're getting into spirits, what we can find is that these are helpful spirits, but then it can be, and these are spirit, and our soul group go into the light. But in spirit releasement therapy, it's releasement because some souls can attach. And then we've got another three categories of spirits. So we're quite specific about what we mean. And that can be an earthbound spirit, which is they've died, but when I say turn around and go to the light, they didn't do it. Or when I say, hey, get consoled, I'm a bit annoyed. Oh, that's okay. There's love and light. Just come into the light and we'll figure it out. And so they do. But what happens if that spirit never turns and sees the light? What happens if they see it and they're so pissed off and so angry that they feel love and they feel hatred towards it and then don't want to go into it? And so then they can float around and get stuck and be earthbound or not able to move on. But they used to have a human body, and then they can float around and attach to people who are in bodies. And so, for example, if they're in a hateful mood and then they see someone else walk around with hate and confusion, they may then vibe with that energy and attach to them. And they can do that, they can sort of come and go. And so sometimes my clients will pick up entities and they may not necessarily, and they can have some effects. Sometimes they come and go, and there are two categories really. So there can be simple cases and they can be complex. So a lot of times it is simple. And if you find an entity like that, you can just say, go into the light and it will. And sometimes there are even dark entities that didn't have a body. And you may say the power of Christ compels you to go into the light, bring Archangel Michael down, and he gets rid of that dark one that's been harassing them. But what I talk about in the book is just showing there is another level. Because this is actually quite well known in healing circles. But I think the thing that I'd like to make more known is that you can, because what's also known is that you tell these entities to go, and a lot of times they do, and you feel like a hero. But then sometimes they don't, and you feel like, oh, I don't really want to deal with this stuff if I can't get it done. And so the book is to show past life awakening is how you can awaken to the reality of these things and how to deal with them. So the book is just so detailed. I'm like illustrating, like this is the therapeutic process. Here's how you do it. If they say this, then say that. And so it's kind of a manual for people. And so then the key thing becomes as well that if they're simple and you just tell them to go and they go, fantastic, you don't need any extra help. But if they start clinging on, they may need more work and to resolve whatever issues they've got. So what I tend to do is I may be regressing someone to a past life and then find out they've got a spirit attachment. We say, hey, why don't you go into the light? It says, no, I can't because of a long story. Then I regress that entity to its past lives. Do I can spend an hour regressing? And I have an example in the book with some earthbound energy that was stuck to my client, a lady, but he was a guy who was in a car crash and he felt guilty about his brother. And he had been there for like 80 years. And then
it was Tia, right? Her name was Tia, I want to think.
Actually, that was Emmy's the one I'm thinking of.
Oh, Emmy, yeah.
Tia had something like that.
With Thomas and Jacob with the darker entities.
That's right.
So, yes.
Well, look, you're right about Tom because Thomas was the earthbound that was attached to my client, but he had an entity attached to him.
Yes.
So this is how complex it gets. Yeah.
I found that to be fascinating. And the other thing that I was super intrigued by was the fact that initially, she we think it's dark energy or darker entity. But when you start having a very interactive conversation, they just seem like they're kind of, for lack of a better word, dum-dums that get caught up in something and didn't really mean to have any real intent, but they felt because of their own, the power of your own belief system, folks, is so like overwhelming in physical and spiritual life. They felt that they had to do these things. And once you started kind of speaking to them,
Mm.
they they gave it up pretty easy. I don't know how else to say that. They're like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I don't need to be doing this." And
Well,
what
I'll tell you what, Christy, you've got to remember how smart that I am. So it looked easy. And like, they look like dum-dums compared to me. He's
they
like,
did.
no.
Yeah.
But no, you're right there. And so it is interesting. Like because they'll try, they can outsmart a lot of people. But again, like I've got a lot of experience and a karmic connection through this, so I can cut through a lot of that. But they honestly, they can lead people a very merry dance. And I do edit these things as well a little bit. So I always,
Yeah.
it takes a little while before I can hone in and just say the right thing. But I'm curious, like, what were some of your other impressions as you read it? But I love the fact that you say, I started off, because people start off thinking it's dark, it's scary, but you've got this beautiful breakthrough of realizing they're not that much to be scared of. They're not as smart as you think. They're not as bad as you think. They're actually kind of like just, some doofus in general life, and I can handle them, so I can handle spirits. I don't have to be afraid just because it's a spirit.
That's exactly how I felt. I'm like, oh, well, that's not really, because just as a side note, I ended up messing around with a pendulum too much. And I had a little,
I'd love to hear this.
I wasn't doing any spiritual hygiene of like, you should have the intention of, you're protected and white light and nothing but your highest and greatest good. Like not saying anything, just kind of working with my pendulum whenever I felt like it. And I don't think I was thinking very much of it. And I started having weird things happen. Like one night, my curtains just like came out of the wall and my Bluetooth speakers were popping on and weird stuff.
Yeah.
So the one thing I did do was I wasn't scared because at the time I was in such a degraded spot mentally that they're really like the devil himself could have appeared and I would have like said, go for it, bitch. I'm fucking over this. Like I was just at a place where like nothing could really affect me. So I wasn't scared. I just saged my whole place and I kind of went through one of my other medium friends that I've met on the show to kind of do a little clearing. But when I read that, it did bring to light like it's not as scary as you think or dark as you think. And if you don't give them that power of your own fear, your own emotion, then there's really no harm that they can do other than,
Exactly right. Amazing.
So that's what I kind of gleaned from that. I had a question. Jacob didn't want to say the name of the entity that was over him.
Yeah.
What is that entity? Do you think there's some sort of devil master with a red dungeon that's some powerful force that is manipulating other dumb little spirits into their, stuff and they're not smart enough to figure it out? Like, what is your opinion on that story of the dude? He's like, I can't say his name or he'll come here. And I'm like, well, who's that?
Exactly.
Who's that?
Yeah. So the situation you're talking about, now we're talking about a dark force entity that didn't have a human body. They are kind of like energies that they feel that they've lived for thousands of years. They feel that they are under the sway of the Dark Master, the Lord, the Dark One, the Evil One. And so, there are all these synonyms for it. And so, do I believe that there's an ultimate devil or Satan? And so we can say the name. And I think it's interesting because I think, particularly in exorcism, which is another, form of releasement, or, there are people in the religious churches. And so F.A.T.E is a secular, it's not particularly religious, but they say you can't say that Satan doesn't exist. You have to acknowledge it. And so I think that's a useful point. That's why I say duality exists. You have to acknowledge it. Dark exists. Light and dark exist. Night and day exist. You can't say there's no night, but you can realize that light is only a function of our earthly perspective. And if you can take a divine perspective, you can come off this planet and you can see that there's no nighttime on the sun. The ultimate reality is light and the eternal sunshine. Dark is temporary and it's not that powerful. You just wait it out and move around, the light will come, and the light is the ultimate reality. So the entities, like this Jacob, who called himself a dark force entity, he believed that he was under the sway of the devil.
Yep.
And he said, and so there was remember the questioning. I say to him, why are you doing this? The Dark Master has told me to. So I said, okay, well, when did he do that? 30 years ago. When's the last time you saw him? It was 30 years ago. Has he been checking in on you? No. What was the job he set you? I've got to kick her ass and make her do this stuff. Well, it's been 30 years. You're not doing a very good job, are you? And he's like, oh, yeah, I suppose not. And like, what do you think is going to happen if he comes back and sees that you're failing? Is he going to punish you? Yes. I'm like, listen, I understand that, but if he's negligent and he's going to come back, the best thing for you is probably to move on. And, while he's not looking, we can just get out of here. And eventually I was able to talk him around to that. But part of that is, throughout that process is like, I can't, because he who can't be named might catch me. And I don't then need to come out and say, I'm afraid of nothing. I call out devil and Satan and everything. And, you don't have to be a dick about it. But I know what he's talking about. He knows that I know what he's talking about. There's a subtlety, and it's just sort of like for scaring him. It's like, if he's sort of like a little deer and there's he thinks there's a leopard prowling around, I'm not going to yell. Nothing, the leopard's not going to get you. You're just drawing unnecessary attention. You don't need to. And you might spook the guy. You might go, this guy's not cool. And then you just spook him. Maybe there is no panther around, but you spook that guy. So you just be cool and say, look, we'll do it your way. We'll just be subtle. We can whisper it. We'll just sort of, we'll get out of here. And that's okay. And so you're just working really with the beliefs of that entity. But then the other big question comes, in the meantime, all of this, by the way, is being relayed by Emmy, a very sweet, lovely American woman in San Francisco who's 35 years old, who hasn't read any books on this and is wondering who the hell is Jacob and what's an entity and how does it stick to you? She doesn't know any of this, but I'm just having this conversation with this entity and getting it to a resolution. And she's sitting in the background in a hypnotic state, but also thinking, interesting process, what is happening? But she's also getting a feeling. So I'd say those kind of things. And I'd say, well, as I say that to him, Emmy, what are you thinking of feeling? I go, oh, he's feeling that you can actually really help him. And he's no longer afraid. And he is willing to come with you. She feels what he's feeling. And so I'm not seeing it. But again, I don't care about visuals. I don't see it. But I can have this very auditory conversation. And I have a feeling and a knowing that I'm heading in the right direction. And that he is, I'm sort of untrapped. He's in a trap. And I'm trapping him into being untrapped. And that it's going where I want to go. And if it starts going off track, I feel that. And I can readjust and get it back on track. So I have that knowing, but I don't see any of that. And I need her to relay it back auditorily. But as she does that, we have these amazing conversations. So, what do you think?
Do you ever get concerned that something is going to leave your client and attach to you?
Yeah, good question. A lot of healers have that concern. In fact, a lot of healers voluntarily do that on purpose. But they tend to be mediums or psychics. And then they will either I know people that bring that on themselves and then purge it. Maybe they'll even throw up or vomit or go through a healing or cleaning process. But for whatever reason, I've had other experiences in my life that I think pretty much make me bulletproof. It's like, if you know Asterix and Obelix, it's like a cartoon where a guy drinks potion. They drink potion to have a special power. But one guy dropped into the potion when he was a baby, so he doesn't have to drink it. And so I've kind of got that thing where I don't do protection rituals. I don't do cleansing afterwards. I've just got this rock solid, you can't touch me. You're ultimately illusionary. I'm sort of Neo in the Matrix and everything's empty and I don't need to protect myself from you because you exist at one level. You exist enough for me to kick your ass, but you don't exist so much that I have to worry about anything being able to tag me. And people also say to me, aren't you worried one day the actual devil might come down and do it? I've been doing it for 20 years and I've got nothing close to it. But I can see why people would think that's a real risk because they don't have the technique and they get tricked by the entity and they end up thinking the entity is really smart. because, honestly, I'm joking when I say how smart I am, but because, and it's very easy. So I do that. Well, it's hard to even say that I do that humbly, but all, so I'm just going to have to own it. But a lot of people, again, like I'm experienced, I got a lot of karmic connection. A lot of things happen to me in this life and past lives that mean I can sort of get away and I can walk the talk. But a lot of people, you do have to be humble, and you don't have to stand up and say, I'm just going to say his name because I'm the king of the world. It is important to know that they can be very deceptive and tricky, and it's very easy to get tricked by them, and they actually are quite intelligent in some ways. That intelligence can work against the therapist if they don't know what they're doing. So that's why it's really important to get mentoring from someone who just knows it inside out and is pretty bulletproof.
Well, what I was going to say was, adding on to that, initially, one of the entities was disguising themselves as Mother Mary or Mary,
Yeah.
Mother Virgin. I'm not a religious person with, but Mother Mary, I guess that's
Yeah.
the way they call it.
That's actually called it. Yeah. She felt it Mother Mary. Yeah.
Mother Mary. And it was only when you started digging a little bit more that she figured out that that's not love, that's not Mother Mary, that's actually a dark force that I'm dealing with that's disguising themselves as a loving, benevolent Mother Mary.
Yeah.
So,
That's right. I mean, there are things as well. It is, yeah. So they are very deceptive, and they can trick
yeah.
us, and and it is interesting at some level, there can be a karmic need or reason for that. So she'd been to a bunch of other healers, and she's a pretty good healer herself, by the way. So this is also not something where anybody needs to feel embarrassed by it, or to feel that, if I get tricked by them, or even that naivety. And so you can go on with a general exploration, and it's also just sort of a young thing. Like, if I'm kind of like an old grandfather who's been doing this for so long, and I've sort of seen a lot of it, but a lot of people are, and that's nice to be older and etc. But it's also great to be young, and there's so much enthusiasm, etc. And we have to go through these learning experiences, and so it's not even necessarily bad in a dualistic, conventional way that I picked up an entity and it ended up affecting me negatively in my life. Well, it affected you negatively finitely, but again, it's one of these things that become a blessing, like a physical illness or a difficult circumstance. That's the thing that actually enables you to learn more about the reality of what can happen. And that's part of what I say. This is why it's hard for me to get tricked, because I've been through the fire and I've seen some tricky things, even in my personal life, in my personal relationships, where I had a girlfriend channel night after night for hour after hour, all sorts of weird entities and weird experiences. So that's part of my karmic connection to it, and that I've seen, a lot of what could possibly happen. So yeah, so that's something where, yeah, and ultimately, and so again, like when that happened to me, I didn't necessarily enjoy it, but it really helped the learning process, and it means I can help other people.
Are you referring to Maya in the book that was channeling? I mean, that was a blow your mind kind of situation too. That was like, whoa, like
What
that was crazy.
Yeah. Well, what was your take on it? Is that something that sounded familiar? Did it resonate in some way, or did you make sense of it somehow?
I mean, I'm just always forever more and more shocked by how much I don't know as far as what is the reality of our the interdimensional nature of our reality. We are living in an interdimensional reality. It's a lot of it's based on vibration, and depending on what you're tuning into, that is what is going to reveal itself. And I like to I want to see more of it. Like, even though that would scare me if I had a friend that started spontaneously channeling in front of me, like it would be disturbing in a way.
Yeah.
I also think that you are karmically connected to that. Doesn't that instance now that happened so many years ago make so much more sense to who you are today? It was foundational to who you are. And even though it was traumatizing, again, traumatizing,
Yeah.
scary, but it launched you into who you were. So it made sense that it happened to you when I read the book. I was like, that makes sense. That kind of formulated who he is now and how he got there. And if you wouldn't have had that experience, you probably still would have gotten to where you were at. But like, I feel like somebody was throwing you into the fire. Like,
Yeah.
here you go. Sink or swim, buddy. Get in there.
Well,
You know?
I love that take. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm glad that you saw that, and I think you're exactly right. But I don't know that I would have been where I am if it
Yeah.
wasn't for that, because that for me was kind of like the kick that I needed. That was kind of like and I was floored. It was sort of like being shot, and that's a kick in the guts, and because of that, it brings it sort of full circle. As I said, I started off meditating, and I went into a hypnotic state, and remember being a hypnotist. And then I actually kept meditating and remembered a past life that I mentioned about being in Egypt and everything. But then the next thing that happened was I literally left that retreat, had another, with a girlfriend. She'd been on the spiritual path for a long time. And yet one night she just turned to me. I said, Maya, are you ready to sleep? And it was like late at night. And she just looked at me and said, Maya is not here. I'm Maya's spirit guide. You can call me Celeste. The voice was completely different. The energy in the room just shifted on a dime. I thought that I was in another world. Couldn't grasp what was happening. I looked at her face. I mean, there was no part of me that thought it was a prank. But I was just looking at her, and her voice, she actually was a French speaker. She had less of an accent. And the tone was, everything about it was completely different. I thought I was in another world. I looked at her. Her face essentially dissolved in front of me, as if the molecules faded out and she went into the matrix and then popped back again. And I was just, what is going on? And I started to get then a little bit fearful. Like, where's Maya? Is she okay?
Yeah.
They said, she's in the background. She can't hear us. I'm still freaking out. I knew she did a bit of Reiki. I'd never really experienced much of it. Just put out her hand, and I just had a wave of complete peace. And all the tension and anxiety in my body just went out. I was completely able to instantly in a state of calm, clarity, and confidence, or calm and clarity. And from there, I was like, well, this is happening, and began talking to her. So at that point, the universe had spontaneously made me, she spontaneously put her in hypnosis and spontaneously made me the kind of person that interviews someone in a hypnotic state, which is what I do now. But that went on for an hour that night. And I woke up the next morning. So you talk about in hypnosis, people are generally witnessing consciousness, but this was something different. She didn't know what had happened. And so I walked out into the little town and thought, I've got to find an explanation for this. I've got to figure it out. And that's the very first day that I found the book, Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss, which is a book about past life regression. It's not about meditation or Buddhism or karma or anything. Well, karma indirectly. And in that, he had that same story about Catherine spontaneously started talking about past lives. And that night before, Maya had been talking about between lives and our past lives. He had to do this, and we had a between life plan. And my spirit guide's doing this, and karma and love and compassion. And that went on actually for over a week, hours of discussion. And it actually, and I don't even know if it was channeling or mediumship, but I think in the end, it became what you could have to call a spiritual emergency, because it went from being a lot of light, beautiful energy, but because she was a little bit too open. So she was channeling spirit guides and between life masters. But then as time went on, her channel was too open, and a bunch of the creepy crawlies in the area got involved as well. And then the voices became more conflicting, a little bit darker, and her day-to-day state deteriorated. So Stanislav Grof calls that a spiritual emergency, which is a crisis during a spiritual awakening in which someone's ego suddenly collapses, as does their customary sense of reality. And so I was sort of a witness to a spiritual emergency. And this is also, she'd been into things like Kundalini awakenings. Not experienced something like that, but she had just blown the roof off. And she ended up having to go back to her country. Her father is a psychiatrist. She had psychiatric treatment, but by definition, spiritual emergencies are something that psychiatry struggles to understand. But we know it wasn't a psychosis or anything psychiatric, because it was a spiritual emergency, because it was a temporary transformative experience that she did then recover from and went on to be a healer in her own right. And I mean, actually ended up meeting her in India 10 years later. And she's she's still a very interesting, amazing person, but she'd recovered. But
Oh,
again, yeah, well, that was that. Without that, and that was the kick that I needed, because I was really getting the messages that you be a healer, and I was like, well, got quite a good job, so maybe no. And they're like, and after that, I did try and go back and be in a suit and everything, but I realized I'm not going to be happy in life if I don't do this. So at age 32, I'd already been 5 years on, 5 years off in India for my 20s, but I thought I'm just going to have to go back. And that's cute in your 20s to be traveling and on the spiritual path, whatever. But when you have to really decide and it's now or never, then it was kind of tricky. And that was part of the push that gave me some of the skills that I'm bragging about. And then, but also, made it something that I couldn't really not do. So it kind of
yeah,
chose me. And that sort of the karmic connection was so clear, but you still have to take the karmic action to make it happen. I didn't want to, because I had these
yeah,
karmic residues, and this is all like law one. I had these karmic residues to overcome. Like I read a book on hypnosis when I was 10, but I also saw Wall Street by Oliver Stone, the movie, when I was 16. I thought that'd be cool. I want to be one of those cool guys. But then I got into financial markets and London and Hong Kong, and I realized, oh, I don't want to be one of these guys. Then I went to India, and all this stuff decided to happen.
I mean, you're here to. I think you're here. You're a warrior of the Great Awakening. You are. I think you're here. I mean, this is just me pulling it out of my brain, but like it feels like you were always meant to come here to help awaken us. I think we are in the time where people are starting to ask bigger questions about our lives, about who we are. I think people are starting to see our old regimes and organizations crumble. Our old systems are crumbling. We're in a new age. We're in the age of Aquarius. We are in the turn of the awakening and all of that. So you're here as a light warrior, man. You're here to help us awaken and heal people, and I think that's your mission. I
Yep.
do.
Whether I wanted to or not. You're right.
Whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I want to talk about one more thing. Do you have one more thing before we go, or do you
Oh,
got to go?
sure, no, this go.
Okay. One last thing I want to talk about was aliens and having alien attachments and alien past life interactions and what that could mean for humanity. What is that? Tell us.
Yeah. Well, actually, talk about the Great Awakening, and we talked about how hypnotherapy moves on and spirit attachment. So we talked about earthbounds and dark forces, and the third category is ETs. And this is something I am seeing more, and you're exactly right. In the last 5 years, I've seen more of this than I did in the first 15. Or yeah, there's a massive uptick. And I think that's because, yes, we're in a great awakening, but the greater the light, the greater the shadow. The more that we bring in light, the more dark forces panic and start to throw Hail Marys and try and trip up light workers. That's why I think it's really important the light workers don't go in naively thinking that there's a great awakening and everything's easy and light, and that there won't be some challenges, because there are. And even I have that quote at the beginning of the book, which is acknowledging that the Buddha, on the night he went on a healer's path for 8 years and finally awoken, but the night beforehand he sat and he remembered his past lives. He realized the law of karma, and he faced the demon Mara, who tried to tempt him or tried to threaten him. And when he had all those 3 phases of that night, then he was able to get to full and complete enlightenment. So if we're going to awaken, we have to, before we do that, we're going to have to understand karma and past lives. I think that's my bias, though. But we are going to have to face some darkness and not be afraid of it. And I love the fact you're so kick-ass. Bring it on,
Let's go.
That's I love that attitude. We need more of that. So you're a great role model for that.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, and we need to be able to face it and know what it is. And so, yeah, and so ETs pop up, and that's interesting. What's going to happen there? But the ETs that I experience are as attachments to people. So I'm not actually even particularly into your ET or UFO lore. So I don't know too much about, the greys or the reptilians or whatever it is. As far as I'm concerned, they're either helpful, neutral, or not helpful. And what I experience, and this is again, I've just got a subjective perspective that I'm a healer, that if some person in this moment's got something blocking them, I want to unblock it. If it's from an earthbound or a dark force or an ET, I don't really care. I just want to, but I care enough to know how it works. So with ETs, what I see is that I can, even if you're doing hypnosis or any meditation, you scan through and imagine an X-ray of light energy, and people might feel in their etheric body that there's some sort of energy attachment. And with ETs, my experience is that it's like a device, and they can be devices that are put there to gather information or to conduct an experiment. And that experiment might be one of the case studies is like they're trying to upgrade somebody, sort of make a hybrid, sort of give them a superpower. And another one can be we're just watching you and gathering data. And either way, and there is sort of a little bit of, some people are kind of quite into ETs. And I even have people that, the other connection that I do find is people who've got past lives as an ET or on another dimension or planet, or as a gray or a reptilian or whatever. And often they're positively disposed towards them, which is fine. And so they may then even have an agreement that I'm going to go into this life, have an attachment, be part of an experiment, and that's cool. But by the time someone comes to, and that's all fine as well. I don't have a problem with that, or I'm not criticizing anybody that does that. But the only time that people come to me is when they're now getting a physical negative side effect as a consequence, and they ask me to help them do that. So what I find is that they then realize that maybe even if I did agree to have some sort of device in me and this is always at a psychic energy level, it's not detectable in any way, it's now affecting me negatively. So in the case of Tia, she realized it was blocking her financially, blocking her relationships, blocking her in IBS and gynecological issues, because it was an egg sort of in her like lower chakras. And it had been put there in an effort to upgrade her. But then again, it had kind of been negligently left. She had kind of partially agreed to it, but I literally talked to that device, connect to the energy that put it in, and then have the discussion that I described of convincing them to release it. And then as she did that, I mean, she had, just a list of problems she directly associated with that. And I was then able to meet her a year later, and then a year later again, and no mention whatsoever of any of these issues or side effects. And so like, this is something again, like, how do you, I don't know how that works, honestly, but I know how to work with it, and I know that it works. So exactly how it works, I'm not sure. And I don't need to know as long as there's that healing effect. But it's one thing I wanted to include in writing so that people can be aware of it. I think it's going to become more important in the years ahead. Yeah. What do you think?
I agree 100%. I think we need to start talking about making this type of stuff more mainstream. I've talked to other people that have said things like they feel that up to of the people that are complaining about, let's say, lower back pain, let's say IBS, let's say negative thoughts in your head. Let's just suss out people like that. I've had people say like 80% of those people probably have some sort of attachment on them, and it is something that could be resolved with an energy clearing or a hypnosis or something like that. There's so many people walking around today that have symptoms, excuse me, and they have no idea what's from, maybe they eat healthy and they exercise and da da da. And I don't know why I have this symptoms or that symptom, or it's simple as the person that we all have a voice in our head that speaks to us, and that voice can ever fill you with love and support. And I'm lucky. Whoever's talking to me in my head is always, they've got my back. I don't talk badly about myself. I don't beat myself up. Sometimes if I make a mistake, obviously I'm not happy with myself, but like overall, I don't look in the mirror and somebody in my head says, "You're ugly today. Go, put a hat on." Or like, I don't have that. But a lot of people have negative thoughts that are constantly intruding their lives and interrupting how they feel about themselves. And I think those are entities. I do. Some people have self-esteem issues, sure, or they were traumatized when they were young and they're suffering from repercussions from that. But I think there's so many mysterious little illnesses and effects that are happening out there that people have no idea it could be as simple as an entity. Not that entities are simple, but it's not being looked at as a thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because it's not something that I would tell somebody that, oh, you've got a negative thought and an issue in your body, it must be an entity. I actually won't say that. And because there's a tendency for people to overdiagnose that or to jump to that conclusion, I'll say, let's assume it's anything else. And so I won't make that pronouncement to other people. And I even encourage them, if they're hearing this, if you're not sure if you've got an entity or not, I would just say that you don't, because I'd rather be wrong rather than give you the suggestion that you do when you don't. But when you say it, Christy, I think it's okay because you're doing that from the perspective that you got a strong sense in your subjective reality that that's the case. And so the people that I work with, I don't never tell somebody you've got negative thoughts and this feeling in your gut. Maybe it's that. I'd never say that. In fact, when they say it to me, I say, you're going to have to convince me because I'm just going to assume it's something easier and simpler. And we probably don't have to do SRT, but then they have to convince me and they have to say, Mark, I've got this really strong feeling. You know what? Actually, I didn't tell you and don't tell anyone else, but I had this dream about being abducted. Or I had this weird dream about, some scary face came at me. And I also did this thing with a pendulum. I probably shouldn't have, but I might have opened some stuff. And so the context is everything. Without context, it's you can't just sort of go leaping to conclusions. But if there's a lot of context and people can, then that's only when I would take on it and consider it as an SRT case. So I even have to be very careful about even accepting, because by accepting someone and saying, yes, I'll cure an entity, I'm sort of giving the suggestion that they have one. And I need to be very convinced that they do before I'm going to do that. And that's why I'm in the book, Past Life Awakening, the case studies, I've only got 7 of them, but they're so detailed because that means I'll give you the intake form. Because you can think, Mark and Christy are talking about if you've got a voice in your head, maybe it's an entity. But read the book and you see how much context there is. And you think, well, I thought I had entity, but now when I see Emmy and Tia, I like, mine's nothing compared to them. Or, oh, I know how to release entities. I do that all the time in my Reiki practice. But then you read the intake forms that you got and you're like, holy shit, that's a serious case. I do my ones are pretty easy. This is pretty hardcore. So did that come across in the book did you like the intake forms, and what do you think about that?
I thought it was amazing. It gives you perspective on who you're speaking with and what their backstory is and what prompted the hypnosis session to even take place. Like, it really gives you a well-rounded, their perspective of what they're coming to you for. And it ends up, they get so blown away by what gets resolved and how it gets resolved that, like, Alvaro, he seemed completely blown away. Even his bully, and I thought this was energetic as well. The guy that bullied him and traumatized him ends up calling while you guys are in your sessions trying to work through his problems. And I felt like, wow, that is energetic synchronicity at its finest right there, ladies and gentlemen. Like, that call couldn't have come at a better time for him.
Yeah.
So that was magic, I thought.
Yeah, it's like what Christy's talking about is this my client had been bullied, very badly as a child.
Yeah.
He's now like 30. He hadn't heard from his bullies for 15 years. He does one session to deal with the anger that he has about his bullies. And then he gets a Facebook message, the day after our first session saying, hey, man, how are you? He just wanted to reach out. Like, what a coincidence.
Is it a coincidence? I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that's a coincidence.
If you're a scientist, it has to be. But,
I know.
that becomes so illogical that the only logical answer is something that is a bit weird.
I mean, it really, you do have to chalk it up to coincidence, because to look at it anything other than that really will blow your mind as to how crazy magical life is and how energy works and how we're all connected. I mean, you really have to start dancing in that direction. Mark, man, I could talk to you for hours about this
We're
stuff.
halfway, Christy. Let's do another one.
Please come back on the show, because honestly, like, I really, it's so fascinating. I would love to split your mind open on a, semi-annual basis and crack into what you've been discovering about reality, about who we are, about how much past lives affect us, and put us on paths, and how much orchestration there is with the spiritual world. You throw ETs in that, like it is just layer upon layer upon layer of magic. So thank you for coming on and spending your time with me and my audience today. I loved it. I'm it makes me excited about life in general when I start having these kind of conversations. I just love it.
Thank you so much. You're a beacon of love in the world and really appreciate being here. It's been fantastic connecting with your energy. Love it.
Oh, thank you. What is the best way for people to pick up your book, Past Life Awakenings? Please pick up his book. It will blow your mind. Might put you on your path. You just don't know.
Wow. Yeah, well, I've got my Past Life Awakening Institute website is there. But then the book is Past Life Awakening, and all my social media, which I'm not very good at, by the way, is Instagram, Past Life Awakening, YouTube, Past Life Awakening. YouTube, I do my best. So check that one out. And wherever books are sold, I think Amazon is pretty good. And then if you go to my website, there's a book page, and it's got a lot of other retailers where you can get hard copies as well.
I will put all that in the show notes, and make sure you go and pick up this book. It'll change your life. It'll change your perspective, that's for sure. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Mark for coming to play on the F.A.T.E podcast show today. I hope you'll come back and join us again. I'd love to continue the discussion. And we'll see you later, guys. Journey well, everybody. Bye-bye. And that is a wrap on this episode of F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. Mark Beale. That was a conversation. I highly suggest you pick up his book, Past Life Awakening. It really is an eye-opener. And full disclosure, it's going to be a little bit different of a wrap out, possibly. It's Friday. We ended our recording hours ago. I had to wait for the upload to the platform because he was in Brazil and I'm in California. And it took a while. So I've had a little beer. I'm feeling good. It's Friday. Let's see how the wrap out goes. I will say this. Having discussions like this with people like Mark, who are so vastly different than the people that I used to interact with on the daily, is so refreshing to me. It's eye-opening. It gives me that feel-good vibe that I am in full on discovery mode, learning things about who we are that I never would have learned or accepted many a moon ago. But not even many moon ago, not very long ago. But I just, what he does really intrigues me. Pick up his book. It is something that will give you, it will give you something to chew on as far as what makes you tick, what motivates you, what direction you get pulled in that maybe you don't understand, the complicated nature of the relationships that we have in our lives that are probably there and complicated to teach us something, whether it's karmic or spiritual or whatever. And I just absolutely loved the conversation. The whole concept of spiritual or spirit releasement therapy is a new concept for me. I did have another guest on the show that was talking about the same issue, that we get entities attached to us and they can cause mental unwellness or illness or things of that nature. I don't know what to think about that. I'm erring on the side of belief. I mean, it makes sense. We are all energy at the end of the day. Everything is energy. And we are just in a different frequency or vibration than like something that is of the spiritual nature. And it makes sense to me that there are things, entities, good, bad, that can get into our energetic field and block our energy, make us feel a certain way. I'm in alignment with that. I think that that is maybe something that we should start talking about more. I mean, I would love to live in a more open society that wasn't so buried in deep with their belief system. I mean, it's it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this show, gang, is to bring you these types of conversations that will somehow penetrate that mind of yours and allow you to perceive our reality in a different way. And I do think truth is stranger than fiction, and it's much more complicated, magical, mystical than we could ever have known. So I hope Mark comes back on the show and we can have another conversation about whether it be the extraterrestrial situation or these past lives that tie in so well to who we are in this lifetime. It's all magical. It really is. Um, Alrighty, guys. Well, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go enjoy my Friday night. I hope you guys are enjoying your whatever you're doing right now, watching, listening to this podcast. Hey, if you're looking to support the show, pick up my book. I put it somewhere. Here it is. Pick up my book. It's on Amazon. It's amazing little story about my dogs. There's nothing else out there like it. Mr. Pickles and Maggie. And it's a great way to support the show and my endeavor to keep raising the consciousness of this planet. And it would mean a lot to me. And it's really good. I wouldn't push it unless I felt pretty confident that when you open the pages, you'd be very pleasantly surprised and happy for making the purchase. So let me know if you do get it, what you think about it. I always love feedback on my book because I always get such amazing, like, oh my God, Busby, this book is so cute. And I'm always like, I know, I need to get it out there, right? And they're like, yes. So I'm doing it. I'm going to start pushing it out there, gang. Pick up my book. It's adorable. It's all about what it means to be a good friend, overcoming obstacles. It's very endearing and you will enjoy. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at F.A.T.E podcast. Follow the show. I'm going to do more. Maybe not beer next time while I'm podcasting. Maybe not. Maybe not. All right, what else? Oh. Welcome to your fate, guys. I'll see you next week. Journey well. Bye-bye.